The door creaked open, followed by the sound of corks popping from bottles. On my security camera screen, I saw her. It was Margaret Whitmore, a woman who walked all over people's boundaries while claiming to be following community rules. She wasn't by herself. 20 of her followers trailed behind her, holding trays and looking excited, as if they were stepping into a dream. They believed I had surrendered. They thought my cabin was now theirs for a victory party. They had no idea that I had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. Under every floorboard, in every door hinge, and behind every light switch, a trap was waiting. They came to celebrate, but when I gave the signal, they would find only their end. My name is Robert Hayes. At 62, I thought my days of fighting were over. I had retired from the Army Corps of Engineers and moved to this quiet lakeside community in northern Michigan. I bought a small cabin on 2 acres of woods, hoping to spend my years fixing old boats and enjoying the peace I had earned. After 30 years of building bridges in war zones, I was ready for quiet. Margaret Whitmore was our HOA president. She was in her early 50s and had moved here from Chicago with a lot of family money and big plans. She ruled our small community of 43 homes like a queen who always got her way. Her husband David seemed like a good man, but he had learned that staying quiet was the easiest way to keep peace at home. I didn't know it then, but Margaret saw my quiet life as a challenge to her perfect, upscale community. The only question was how far she would go to make me leave. The trouble began small. 3 weeks after I moved in, Margaret knocked on my door. She held a clipboard and had a smile that didn't look real. She said some neighbors had complained about my property, even though I hadn't spoken to a single one. She wanted to talk about community standards. My big mistake? I had planted wildflowers instead of a neat lawn, and my boat dock looked old-fashioned instead of modern. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice sounding sweet but fake, "I'm sure you want to fit in. These small changes will help everyone feel more comfortable." I should have heard the warning in her words, but I still believed people could solve problems by talking. In the first month, I received 14 notices for breaking the rules. My mailbox was the wrong color. My gravel driveway made too much dust. The sounds from my workshop during the day were suspicious. Each notice had a fine, starting at $50 and going up to $500. When I went to an HOA meeting to talk about it, Margaret stopped me before I could finish. "Mr. Hayes, this community has standards. They were here long before you. Maybe you would be happier in a different neighborhood." The room became quiet. The neighbors I had hoped to befriend all looked down at their shoes. I knew then that Margaret didn't want to find a solution. She wanted me to give up completely or get out. After that, she started a campaign to isolate me. Margaret told everyone that I was the grumpy veteran who wouldn't follow simple rules. Neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street to avoid me. My invitation to the neighborhood party got lost in the mail. When I tried to talk to people at the lake, they would quickly end the conversation. Looking nervously toward Margaret's giant house, it was a quiet kind of war, and Margaret was very good at it. But she didn't stop there. She began to find new ways to harass me. She would call for emergency HOA meetings while I was busy in my workshop, then fine me for not showing up. She had the community gardeners accidentally dump grass clippings on my driveway every week, so I had to clean it up before I could go anywhere. She even told the post office my address was confusing, so my mail was sent to her office. I have to wait weeks before she gave it to me, along with a lecture about community rules. Each problem was small, but together they were a clear pattern of bullying. The worst moment was at the big community barbecue in July. I brought my grandmother's famous potato salad, hoping it would help me make friends. But Margaret announced that no outside food was allowed because of health rules. Then, in front of everyone, she threw my potato salad in the trash, explaining how some people just don't understand the rules. The 42 people who watched became witnesses to her trying to make me feel small and worthless. As I walked home alone, listening to the party behind me, something inside me changed. I wasn't just hurt anymore. My 30 years in the military had taught me to see patterns, find weaknesses, and make backup plans. Margaret saw a defeated old man, but I was gathering information. Margaret didn't realize that everything she did was giving me clues. Every fake violation notice showed me where her rules were weak. Many of them weren't even in the official HOA bylaws. Every time she turned a neighbor against me, she showed me who her friends were. Every time she tried to embarrass me, she taught me how she thinks. Her pride made her easy to predict. The final straw came at the August HOA meeting. Margaret announced her biggest plan yet. She had found a rule about my property that she thought could be used to allow community access. She proposed that the HOA take over my cabin for community events while I could live in my workshop. The vote was set for September, and she already had enough people on her side. As I walked home, Margaret had no idea she had just made the mistake that would ruin her. The next morning, my first call was to my old friend, Colonel Sarah Martinez. She was now a military lawyer who specialized in property law. In 2 days, she found something Margaret had missed. Our HOA was using rules that hadn't been legally updated since 1987. Half of Margaret's community standards were not legal at all. Even better, the rule Margaret wanted to use against me actually protected me. It stopped the HOA from telling me what I could do with my land. "Robert," Sarah said on our video call, "this woman has been breaking the law for months. Do you just want to protect yourself, or do you want to fix the problem for good?" I knew what she meant. I wanted to fix it. My second call was to Jake Morrison, a man from my old unit who now ran a security company. "If this lady wants to play games," I said, "let's show her what happens when you mess with people who know how to survive." By the end of our talk, I had a complete plan to turn Margaret's party into a lesson she would never forget. Jake would set up the technical parts, while I prepared the legal and social traps. The biggest help came from someone I didn't expect, David Whitmore. I had seen him in his garden, watching with a look of shame whenever Margaret bullied me. One evening, he walked over to my dock with 2 beers and a story that changed everything. "Robert," he said, his voice full of regret, "I need you to know that not everyone agrees with Margaret. When she gets an idea in her head, she can't let it go. I've been looking at the HOA finances. What she wants to do with your cabin is not just wrong, it's impossible. Can't afford the legal fight and our insurance won't cover it." David's confession gave me a flood of new information. Margaret had been lying to everyone about the community's money. She was using our fees for her own projects while saying we were saving for repairs. The big drainage project that cost us $40,000? Her brother-in-law was the contractor, and the work was never even finished. David had been keeping records, but he was too afraid of Margaret to speak up alone. Most importantly, he told me Margaret's plan for my cabin wasn't for the community at all. She wanted to throw private parties for her rich friends from Chicago and use our HOA money to pay for it. This changed my plan. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was going to expose a leader who was cheating and abusing her power over everyone. My engineering background was more useful than Margaret could have imagined. I studied our community's roads and pipes, looked at public records, and did what we call terrain analysis in the Army. What I found was very bad. Margaret had hired companies owned by her friends that charged way too much for simple jobs. I could have done that $40,000 drainage project for $3,000. And I discovered she was getting tax breaks for community projects that were really just improvements to her own house, like her private boat dock that no one else could use. With this proof, I started my own quiet campaign. I talked to 3 other military veterans, 2 retired teachers, and a former business owner in our neighborhood. We formed a secret accountability committee and met in my workshop. Together, we put together a clear picture of how Margaret was using our HOA as her personal bank account. The trap I was setting wasn't just physical, though Jake's security upgrades to my cabin were very thorough. It was a legal, financial, and social trap. 2 weeks before the vote, David found out that Margaret had already hired a catering company for a community celebration at my cabin. Planned for the weekend after the meeting, she was so sure she would win. The HOA meeting was on September 15th. Margaret had decorated the room and even hired a photographer. It was clear she expected a victory party. She gave a presentation with fake pictures, showing my wildflowers as ugly weeds and my workshop as a danger. Her big finish was a drawing of my cabin turned into a wellness center. It was ironic. She was trying to steal my home to create the same kind of peaceful place I had already built. But with her in charge, when it was time for discussion, I stayed quiet as her supporters praised her plan. But then David Whitmore stood up. "Before we vote," he said, holding a thick folder, "I think everyone should see the real financial records." Passed out copies of bank statements and bills. "Our fees have gone up, but our savings have gone down. Margaret has been using our money for her own projects." The room filled with shock and anger. A neighbor, Mr. Rodriguez, stood up, shaking. "This shows the money I paid for drainage was used to build Margaret's private boat dock." Margaret tried to regain control, but her power was disappearing. That's when I finally stood up. I connected my laptop to the projector. My first slide showed how much Margaret had overpaid her friends for jobs. She had wasted over $200,000 of our money. My second slide showed the tax fraud. My third slide was a timeline of her harassment against me, including emails to the catering company where she wrote, "Once I get rid of the old man, this place will be perfect for entertaining." Her Chicago friends started to sneak out. My last slide showed the actual laws. Her whole plan was illegal. "Now," I said, looking right at her, "I have a proposal. Instead of voting to steal my property, let's vote on whether Margaret should still be our president." Just then, a deputy sheriff walked in. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "you are being served with a notice. The county is investigating you for fraud and theft." As Margaret sat in stunned silence, I added one more thing. "I'm not just a retired engineer," I said. "I specialized in community planning. Our drainage is failing, our roads are a mess, and Margaret has stolen our money. If you'll let me, I'd like to help fix what she has broken." The vote was unanimous. Margaret was removed as president. As the meeting ended, neighbors came to apologize. Mrs. Rodriguez hugged me with tears in her eyes. "Robert, I'm so sorry we let her turn us against you." 3 months later, I was in my wildflower garden. Margaret had agreed to pay back all the money she took, nearly $300,000, to avoid going to jail. That money would now pay for the real repairs our community needed, with me helping to plan them, and that party she had planned. It sort of happened. When Margaret and her 20 friends broke into my cabin that Saturday night, they set off every trap Jake and I had installed. Sprinklers soaked their fancy clothes. Loudspeakers blasted the sounds of barking dogs and police sirens. Hidden devices dumped glitter all over them. And the expensive champagne they brought got locked inside my fridge, where the police found it when they arrived to arrest them for breaking and entering. The security camera video of rich people covered in glitter running from my house became a local legend. 6 months later, our community was a different place. The new HOA board, which I was on, was open and fair. We had potluck dinners where my grandmother's potato salad was now a favorite. The kids who used to avoid me now came to my workshop to learn how to build things. My cabin, which Margaret wanted for her parties, became a real community space where neighbors gathered to help each other. A year after Margaret was removed, we held our first annual wildflower festival in my front yard. A young girl named Emma, who now wanted to be an engineer like me, had organized the whole thing. She made a sign that said, "Home is where you're welcomed, not where you're tolerated." As I looked at my neighbors, now true friends, I realized Margaret had been right about one thing. I had completely changed the community. She just didn't understand that some changes are for the better. The little sign by my mailbox, the one she said was the wrong color, now reads, "The Hayes family, engineers, gardeners, neighbors." Emma painted it herself. Margaret taught us all that bullies only have power when good people do nothing. Sometimes the quietest person is just waiting for the right time to show everyone what real strength looks like.